Princess Arya stood alone in the observation chamber of her crystalline starship, gazing down at the blue and green planet that humans called Earth. Her violet eyes reflected the swirling clouds below, and her silver hair floated gently around her shoulders as if moved by an invisible breeze. She had lived for 300 years, traveled to more worlds than she could count, and commanded respect from the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Yet standing here looking at this small planet, she felt something she had never experienced before. It was a hollow ache in her chest, a longing that all her power and all her knowledge could not fill. Behind her, 2 dragons stirred from their rest. Ember, whose scales shimmered like molten rubies and whose breath could melt starship hull, lifted his massive head and regarded his mistress with ancient golden eyes. Frost, whose body gleamed like diamonds carved from winter itself and whose touch could freeze fire, uncoiled her serpentine form and moved closer to Arya. The dragons were not pets in the way humans understood the word. They were companions, friends, partners in adventure who had chosen to bond with Arya when she was just a child fleeing her homeworld. Arya reached out and stroked Ember's snout, feeling the warmth radiating from his scales. The dragon rumbled deep in his throat, a sound like distant thunder mixed with purring. Frost pressed her cold nose against Arya's other hand, and the princess smiled at the contrast between her 2 beloved dragons. Hot and cold, fire and ice, chaos and calm, they balanced each other perfectly just as they balanced her. "Do you think we will find it here?" Arya whispered to her dragons, speaking in the ancient language of her people that sounded like wind chimes and rustling leaves. "Do you think humans truly feel love the way the stories say they do?" Ember snorted, sending small sparks dancing through the air. Frost tilted her head and made a soft chirping sound. Neither dragon could speak in words that most beings would understand. But Arya had been with them so long that she knew their thoughts as clearly as if they had spoken. They were curious about Earth, about humans, about this quest their princess had embarked upon. But they would follow her anywhere, even if they did not fully understand why she needed this. Arya turned back to the viewing screen and touched the controls. The ship's computer displayed information about the planet below. Earth was young compared to her homeworld, and humans were even younger as a species. They had only recently begun to explore beyond their own planet, taking their first tentative steps into the vast ocean of space. By the standards of the galactic community, they were children. Primitive, fragile, short-lived children. But the stories about them had spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. Traders spoke of human determination, how they would attempt the impossible and sometimes succeed through sheer stubbornness. Explorers told tales of human creativity, how they made art and music that could move even species who experienced reality in completely different ways. Diplomats whispered about human compassion, how they would help strangers at great cost to themselves simply because it was the right thing to do. And everyone, from the oldest starfaring civilizations to the newest space travelers, spoke with wonder and sometimes fear about how deeply humans felt love. Arya's people, the Silvery, were what humans would call elves if they ever met. Tall and graceful, with pointed ears and features that seemed almost too perfect to be real. The Silvari lived for thousands of years and possessed abilities that seemed like magic to less advanced species. They were respected throughout the galaxy for their wisdom, their art, and their mastery of technologies that blended science and what others called sorcery. But the Silvari did not love the way humans did. Oh, they felt affection and loyalty and attachment. They formed bonds that lasted centuries. They created beauty and sought knowledge and protected what they valued. But their emotions were cool and measured, like a gentle stream rather than a raging river. They made decisions based on logic and long-term thinking. They rarely acted on impulse or let feelings override reason. Arya had always been different. Even as a child, she felt things more intensely than other Silvari. She laughed too loudly and cried too easily, and wanted things with a passion that made her tutors uncomfortable. Her parents, who ruled one of the great city ships of her people, tried to teach her restraint and control. They sent her to the best teachers, who instructed her in meditation and emotional discipline. But Arya could not dim the fire that burned inside her. When she was 50 years old, barely an adolescent by Silvari standards, she ran away from home. She took nothing but the clothes on her back and a small shuttle that she barely knew how to fly. She would have died in the depths of space if Ember and Frost had not found her. The dragons were young then too, newly hatched from cosmic storms at the edge of a dying star system. They were lost and alone, and so was Arya. They found each other by chance or fate or the mysterious force that sometimes connects souls across the universe. The dragons bonded with Arya instantly, and she with them. They became family in a way that went deeper than blood. Together, they traveled the galaxy. Arya learned to pilot ships properly and to fight when necessary, and to negotiate with aliens who saw her as a curiosity or a threat. The dragons grew larger and more powerful, their abilities expanding beyond what even ancient dragon lore suggested was possible. Arya discovered that she had inherited abilities from her royal bloodline that made her formidable even among the Sylvari. She could manipulate energy with her mind, creating shields and weapons from pure will. She could sense the emotions of beings around her, feeling their joy and pain and fear as if they were her own. She could survive in environments that would kill most organic life, protected by an inner strength that she did not fully understand. And with her dragons at her side, she was nearly unstoppable. Arya became a legend in some parts of the galaxy. She helped settle disputes between warring species. She rescued colonists trapped on dying worlds. She hunted space pirates who preyed on the weak. She explored ancient ruins and recovered lost knowledge. She did good wherever she could, driven by that burning passion inside her that demanded she make a difference. But through all her adventures, all her victories and discoveries and narrow escapes, she felt that hollow ache growing stronger. She would watch other beings connect with each other in ways she could not. She would feel the echo of their emotions and wonder why her own felt muted in comparison. She would see pairs and families and communities bound together by something invisible yet powerful, and she would feel like an outsider looking through a window at a warmth she could never enter. Then she heard the stories about humans and their capacity for love. At first, she dismissed them as exaggerations. Every species had legends about themselves after all. But the stories kept coming from too many different sources. A Mantarian merchant told her about a human who had sacrificed her own life to save a stranger's child. A Valorian pilot described how his human crewmate had refused to abandon him when their ship was damaged, staying with him for days in a dying shuttle when she could have taken the only escape pod. A Xinthian explorer played a recording of human music for her, a simple song about love and loss, and Arya had felt tears on her face before she even realized she was crying. She began to research humans obsessively. She studied their history, their art, their literature. She watched recordings of their lives, listened to their conversations, tried to understand what made them different. And the more she learned, the more certain she became that humans possessed something her own people had lost or never had. Humans loved with their whole beings. They formed bonds that transcended logic and reason. They would fight and die for those they loved without hesitation. They created families not just from blood relations, but from choice and shared experience. They made sacrifices that seemed foolish by any rational calculation, but were considered noble by their culture. They felt joy and sorrow and passion with an intensity that sometimes destroyed them, but also created astonishing beauty. Arya wanted to feel that. She needed to feel that. She needed to know if what she felt inside herself, that fire that had always made her different from other Sylvari, was anything like what humans experienced. She needed to know if she was capable of loving the way humans did, or if that ability was unique to their species. So she set course for Earth. Her ship approached the planet slowly, and Arya felt her hearts beating faster. The Sylvari had two hearts, one for logic and one for emotion, her people said. Right now, both of them were racing. She had faced down hostile aliens and navigated through black holes and stared at the birth of stars. But approaching this small blue planet filled her with a nervousness she had not felt in decades. "Computer, scan for suitable landing locations," she commanded in English, one of 20 human languages she had learned during her journey here. "I want somewhere quiet, away from major cities but near a population center, somewhere with mountains if possible." The computer processed her request and highlighted several locations. Arya studied them carefully, using her empathic senses to feel the emotional resonance of different areas even from orbit. Most places felt chaotic or aggressive or fearful or numb, but there was one location in North America, in a region called Colorado, where the town was smaller than Arya had expected, which pleased her. The main street stretched for perhaps half a mile, lined with brick buildings that looked old by human standards, though laughably young compared to structures on her homeworld. Warm light spilled from windows, and she could hear voices and laughter echoing through the evening air. A few humans walked along the sidewalks, bundled in jackets against the autumn chill that Arya barely felt. She walked slowly, taking in everything with wide eyes. Ember's claws dug gently into her shoulder as he swiveled his head back and forth, examining this new world with dragon curiosity. Frost padded beside her, leaving tiny frost patterns on the concrete wherever her paws touched, though they melted within seconds. The first few humans who saw them stopped and stared. Arya heard gasps and whispered conversations, felt waves of surprise and confusion and wonder washing over her empathic senses. But no one screamed or ran away or called for authorities. Instead, people watched with the kind of cautious curiosity that Arya found encouraging. Perhaps in a world where humans were beginning to explore space, the appearance of an obvious alien was surprising but not terrifying. A small girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, broke away from her mother's hand and ran toward Arya. The mother called out in alarm, but the girl ignored her, stopping a few feet in front of Arya and staring up at her with huge brown eyes. "Are you an elf?" the girl asked, her voice filled with excitement rather than fear, like in my storybooks. "And are those baby dragons?" Arya knelt down so she was at eye level with the child and smiled. "I am something like an elf, yes. And these are my dragons, Ember and Frost. Would you like to meet them?" The girl nodded so enthusiastically that her pigtails bounced. Arya gestured and Ember hopped down from her shoulder, landing on the ground in front of the child. He was the size of a kitten now, and he made himself look as friendly as possible, tilting his head and making soft chirping sounds. The girl reached out slowly, and when her fingers touched his scales, she gasped with delight. "He's so warm, and his skin feels like rubies." She looked at Frost, who had moved closer. "Can I pet her too?" "Be gentle," Arya warned. "Frost is very cold." The girl touched Frost carefully, then squealed with surprised laughter. "She's like ice. But she's not frozen, she's alive. This is the best day ever." The girl's mother had reached them by now, looking torn between fear and wonder. She kept glancing at Arya's pointed ears and unusual eyes, then at the dragons, then back at her daughter, who was now sitting on the ground while both dragons climbed over her. "I'm so sorry if she bothered you," the mother said nervously. "Emma gets excited easily and she's obsessed with fantasy stories." "She did not bother me at all," Arya assured her. "I am new to your town and your world. I hope my appearance has not frightened anyone." "Your world?" The mother blinked. "You mean you're actually from another planet? Not just wearing some kind of costume?" "I am from a world very far from here," Arya confirmed. "My name is Arya. I have come to Earth to learn about humans." Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered. More children came to see the dragons, while adults peppered Arya with questions. She answered as honestly as she could, explaining that she came in peace, that her people had been watching Earth for some time, that she wanted to understand human culture and emotions. She did not mention her specific quest to understand love, sensing that such a personal revelation might make these strangers uncomfortable. An elderly man with kind eyes and a weathered face stepped forward from the crowd. "Well, Miss Arya from space, you picked a good town to visit. We're friendly folk here in Pine Ridge. Got a place to stay?" Arya hesitated. "I have my ship, but I would like to spend time among humans if possible." "There's a bed and breakfast 2 streets over," a young woman offered. "Betty, who runs it, would probably love to have an alien guest. She's always saying nothing interesting ever happens here." "But first," the elderly man said with a smile, "you should meet Claire at the bookstore. If you want to learn about humans, books are a good place to start, and Claire knows every book that's ever been written, I swear." The crowd began to disperse as parents called children home for dinner, and adults returned to their evening routines. But several people gave Arya directions to the bookstore, each adding their own details about Claire and how wonderful she was. Arya felt warmed by their friendliness, by how quickly they had accepted her presence despite her obvious strangeness. Emma, the little girl, hugged both dragons before her mother led her away. "Will you still be here tomorrow?" she called back. "I want to show you my dragon drawings." "I will be here," Arya promised and meant it. She followed the directions to the bookstore, which turned out to be a charming building with large windows displaying towers of books and a hand-painted sign that read, "Claire's Corner Books." Warm light glowed from inside, and through the window, Arya could see shelves packed with volumes stretching from floor to ceiling. Ember hopped back onto her shoulder, and Frost pressed against her leg as if offering moral support. Arya was surprised to find herself nervous. She had negotiated with galactic senators and faced down space pirates without fear. But the thought of walking into this small bookstore and meeting this Claire person made her hearts race. She pushed open the door, and a small bell chimed overhead. The scent of paper and ink and something sweet like vanilla filled her nose. The bookstore was larger inside than it appeared from outside, with cozy reading nooks and comfortable chairs scattered among the shelves. Soft music played from somewhere, a gentle melody that made Arya feel instantly relaxed. "I'll be right with you," a voice called from somewhere in the back. "Just reshelving some returns." Arya wandered between the shelves, running her fingers along the spines of books. She had studied human literature during her journey to Earth, but seeing physical books in person was different. Each one represented human thoughts and dreams and stories, pieces of human consciousness frozen in paper and ink. The variety was overwhelming. Fiction and nonfiction, old and new, every genre and topic imaginable. "Sorry about the wait. I was trying to find a home for this cookbook that someone returned to the completely wrong." Oh, Arya turned toward the voice and froze. The woman standing. There was nothing like she had expected and exactly what she had been searching for all at once. She was average height for a human, with wavy auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun, secured with what appeared to be a pencil. She wore jeans and a sweater with a coffee stain on the sleeve, and glasses that had slipped down her nose. Her brown eyes were wide with shock as she stared at Arya, and the book she had been holding slipped from her fingers. But what struck Arya most intensely was the emotional signature radiating from this woman. It was warm and complex and alive in a way that made Arya's empathic senses sing. Curiosity and fear and excitement and wonder all swirled together, but underneath it all was something deeper. A loneliness that echoed Arya's own, a longing for connection, a soul that felt things deeply and perhaps too much. "You're an alien," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A real alien, in my bookstore, with a dragon on your shoulder." "Two dragons," Arya corrected softly, gesturing to Frost. "And yes, I am from another world. My name is Arya. The people in town said I should meet you if I wanted to learn about humans." Claire bent down to pick up the dropped book, her hands shaking slightly. When she straightened, she had composed herself somewhat, though her emotions still radiated like waves. "They did they? Well, I suppose books are a good window into humanity. We write down all our dreams and fears and hopes." She paused. "I'm Claire, by the way. Claire Patterson. Welcome to my bookstore and to Earth, I guess." "Thank you," Arya said. She felt embers shift on her shoulder, and the dragon made a small questioning sound. "My dragons are curious about your books. They have never seen so many in one place. Why dragons can read?" Claire asked, then laughed at herself. "That might be the least strange question I could ask right now. There's an alien princess in my store with dragons, and I'm asking if they can read." "How did you know I am a princess?" Arya asked, surprised. Claire's cheeks flushed pink. "Oh, I don't know. You just have this bearing, this way of standing like you're used to people listening to you. Plus, you're beautiful in that way that seems almost unreal. And you showed up with legendary creatures as companions. It seemed like a reasonable guess." Now it was Arya's turn to feel warmth in her cheeks. In all her 300 years, she could not remember the last time someone had made her blush. "You are perceptive. I am a princess of my people, though I left my throne behind many years ago to travel the galaxy." "That sounds like something out of a book," Claire said softly. Then she seemed to shake herself out of her daze. "Would you like some tea? I was just about to close up for the evening, but I can make us some tea and we can talk. I have about 1,000,000 questions, and I'm guessing you probably have some too." "I would like that very much," Arya said, and realized she meant it more than she had expected. Over the next few weeks, Arya became a fixture in Pine Ridge. The initial shock of an alien princess living among them wore off quickly, replaced by a warm acceptance that both surprised and delighted her. The humans of this small town treated her not as a curiosity or a threat, but simply as a new neighbor who happened to come from the stars. She moved her ship to a more permanent location in the mountains above town, where it would not draw constant attention, but most of her time was spent in Claire's bookstore, which had quickly become her favorite place on Earth. Every morning she would arrive when Claire opened the doors, and she would spend hours reading, talking, helping customers, and learning what it meant to be human. Claire proved to be an excellent teacher, though she always insisted she was not teaching at all. "I'm just living my life," she would say. "You're the one doing the learning." But Arya learned more from Claire than she had from all her books and research. She learned that humans showed love through small gestures as much as grand declarations. The way Claire made sure to buy Arya's favorite tea even though it was expensive. The way she remembered that Ember liked to nap in sunny spots and would move a chair near the window for him. The way she noticed when Arya was sad and would put on music that lifted her spirits without being asked. Arya also learned that love was not just romantic. She watched Claire interact with the people of Pine Ridge and saw love in countless forms. There was Betty from the bed and breakfast, who had become friends with Claire in high school and still met her for coffee every Wednesday. There was old George, who had lost his wife 5 years ago and came to the bookstore every day to sit and read because the silence of his empty house was too painful. There was Danny, the mechanic who had been one of Claire's classmates and brought her soup when she was sick and fixed her car for free because that's what friends do. The town embraced Arya as well. Emma, the little girl who had first approached her, became a regular visitor to the bookstore after school. She would sit with Ember and Frost, drawing pictures of dragons and telling them elaborate stories that the dragons seemed to genuinely enjoy. Emma's mother, Lisa, was a teacher at the local school who asked Arya if she would be willing to give a presentation about space and other worlds. Arya agreed, and found herself facing a classroom of wide-eyed children asking questions faster than she could answer them. "Do aliens have pets?" one boy asked. "What do you eat on spaceships?" A girl wanted to know. "Can you really fly faster than light?" Another child questioned. Arya answered them all patiently and found that she enjoyed it immensely. The children's open curiosity and lack of fear reminded her why she had come to Earth in the first place. Humans felt everything so intensely, even joy and wonder at learning about the universe. But it was the evenings with Claire that Arya treasured most. After the bookstore closed, they would make dinner together in Claire's small apartment above the store. Arya had never learned to cook, having always had royal chefs or ship synthesizers to provide meals. Claire taught her how to chop vegetables and season meat and time everything, so it finished at the same moment. "Cooking is an act of love," Claire explained one evening as they made pasta together. "You take raw ingredients and time and effort and attention, and you transform them into something that nourishes someone. Every good meal is a gift." Arya stirred the sauce, watching it bubble and thicken. "On my world, we have machines that can create perfect meals in seconds. They taste good, but there is no love in them." "Efficiency isn't everything," Claire said, adding herbs to the pot. "Sometimes the imperfect thing made with care is better than the perfect thing made without it." They ate on Claire's balcony that evening, watching the sun set behind the mountains while Ember and Frost played in the yard below. The pasta was slightly overcooked and the sauce was too salty, but Arya thought it was the best meal she had ever eaten, because she had made it with someone who cared about her. As the weeks passed, Arya found herself experiencing emotions she had never felt before. When Claire laughed at something silly, Arya's heart felt light and warm. When Claire was stressed about bookstore finances, Arya felt anxious and wanted to fix everything. When Claire told stories about her past, about her dreams that had not come true and the people she had lost, Arya felt grief as if those losses were her own. One rainy afternoon, Arya found Claire crying in the break room. She was holding a photograph of a woman who looked like an older version of herself. "My mom," Claire explained, wiping her eyes. "She died 3 years ago. Sometimes it hits me all over again that she's gone, and it hurts just as much as the day I lost her." Arya sat beside her, feeling Claire's pain washing over her empathic senses like waves. But instead of being overwhelmed by it as she might have been in the past, she found that she wanted to share it. She wanted to carry some of that burden so Claire did not have to carry it alone. "Tell me about her," Arya said softly. And Claire did. She talked for hours about her mother, about growing up in the bookstore that her mother had started, about the books they read together and the dreams they shared. She talked about her mother's final months, fighting cancer with a stubbornness that Claire had inherited, and about holding her hand when she finally let go. "She made me promise I would live fully," Claire said. "She said life was too short to waste on fear or regret. She wanted me to take chances and follow my heart even if it led somewhere scary." "Did you?" Arya asked. "Follow your heart?" Claire laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "I tried. I left Pine Ridge after college, went to New York to work in publishing. I was going to edit important books and live in a tiny apartment and be part of something bigger than myself. But my mom got sick and I came home to take care of her, and after she died I just stayed. This bookstore, this town, it felt like all I had left of her. Do you regret staying? Arya asked. Sometimes, Claire admitted. I love the bookstore and the people here. But I wonder what might have happened if I had gone back to the city. If I had pursued those dreams instead of playing it safe. She looked at Arya with red-rimmed eyes. Does that make me a coward? No, Arya said firmly. It makes you human. My people plan everything centuries in advance. We never act on emotion or impulse. But you loved your mother enough to sacrifice your dreams to care for her. That is not cowardice. That is the deepest kind of love. Claire smiled through her tears and reached out to squeeze Arya's hand. The touch sent warmth spreading through Arya's entire body, and she realized with sudden clarity that she was falling in love with this human woman. Not the broad love for humanity that had brought her to Earth, but specific, particular, terrifying love for Claire Patterson with her messy hair and coffee-stained sweaters and heart that felt everything so deeply it hurt. The realization should have frightened her, but instead Arya felt a sense of rightness. This was what she had crossed the galaxy to find. This feeling of wanting someone's happiness more than your own, of being willing to share their pain, of feeling more alive in their presence than anywhere else in the universe. But Arya did not say anything. She was not sure if Claire felt the same way, and she did not want to burden her with unwanted affection, so she simply held Claire's hand and let her cry and told her stories about beautiful places in the galaxy where Arya would take her someday if she wanted. The turning point came during a town festival in late autumn. Pine Ridge was celebrating the harvest with music and food and games in the town square. Claire had been helping organize the event for months, and she was excited to show Arya this tradition. They walked through the festival together as evening fell, and lanterns were lit throughout the square. Children ran past with candy apples. Musicians played folk songs that made people dance. The air smelled of cinnamon and wood smoke and happiness. Emma found them and dragged them to see a puppet show that told a story about a dragon and a knight who became friends. Ember and Frost watched from Claire's shoulders, both having shifted to their smallest size. The dragons seemed fascinated by the puppets, tilting their heads and chirping at the performance. After the show, Claire pulled Arya toward the dance area where people were swirling to a lively song. Come on, you need to experience a human harvest festival properly. I do not know how to dance like this, Arya protested. Neither do half these people, Claire laughed. That's not the point. The point is to be joyful together. She took Arya's hands and pulled her into the dancing crowd. At first Arya felt awkward and uncertain, but Claire was laughing and spinning and not caring if her steps were perfect, and soon Arya found herself laughing too. They danced through several songs, sometimes following the rhythm and sometimes just moving however felt right. When a slower song began, Claire stepped closer and placed her hands on Arya's shoulders. Other couples around them were dancing in pairs, holding each other close. Arya's heart raced as she put her hands on Claire's waist, feeling the warmth of her body through the fabric of her dress. They swayed together slowly, not quite keeping time with the music. Around them people danced and laughed and lived, but Arya was only aware of Claire. The way her hair had escaped its bun and fell around her face. The way her brown eyes caught the lantern light. The way she smelled like vanilla and old books and home. The months that followed were the happiest of Arya's long life. She and Claire fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Mornings began with tea in the bookstore before it opened, sitting in the window seat while Ember and Frost chased dust motes through the sunbeams. Days were spent helping customers, restocking shelves, and sometimes closing early to explore the mountains or visit nearby towns. Evenings were for cooking together, watching human movies that Claire insisted were essential cultural education, and talking about everything and nothing until late into the night. Arya learned about human love not through grand gestures, but through the small, everyday acts that wove lives together. The way Claire would place a bookmark in whatever Arya was reading, so she would not lose her place. The way Arya would use her abilities to warm Claire's always cold feet on winter mornings. The way they developed their own private language of looks and touches that spoke volumes without words. But Arya also learned that love meant sharing burdens and facing challenges together. The bookstore was struggling financially. Claire had poured her heart into the business her mother had started, but online retailers were making it hard for small independent stores to survive. Some months Claire barely made enough to cover rent and utilities. I might have to close it, Claire admitted one evening as she stared at spreadsheets that made no sense to Arya. I hate even thinking about it. This store is all I have left of my mom, but I can't keep losing money forever. Arya felt Claire's distress like a physical pain. She wanted to fix it immediately, to use her resources or technology to solve the problem. She could synthesize valuable materials to sell or share advanced knowledge that humans would pay fortunes for, but she hesitated, sensing that simply throwing money at the problem might not be the right answer. What would make people want to come to your bookstore instead of buying books online? Arya asked. Claire sighed. The personal touch, I guess. Recommendations based on knowing the customer. Community events that bring people together. The experience of browsing physical books and finding unexpected treasures. She laughed bitterly. All the things that don't scale or compete with cheap prices and free shipping. Then perhaps we should focus on those things, Arya suggested. Make the bookstore not just a place to buy books, but a place where people want to be. Over the next few weeks, they transformed the bookstore together. Arya used her abilities to subtly enhance the atmosphere, making the space feel warmer and more inviting in ways humans could not quite explain, but definitely felt. They added comfortable seating and better lighting. They started a weekly book club that drew surprising numbers of people who were hungry for community and discussion. They began hosting author readings through video calls with writers from around the world, which fascinated people who had never met anyone famous. Arya also started doing informal talks about space and alien civilizations, which became incredibly popular. People came from neighboring towns to hear the alien princess speak about distant worlds and ancient cultures, and the vast wonders of the galaxy. She always insisted they should buy a book while they were there, and most people were happy to do so. Slowly, the bookstore's fortunes began to turn around. More customers meant more sales. More events meant more visibility. People started talking about Claire's corner books as a destination, a special place worth visiting. Claire's stress began to ease, and Arya felt proud that she had helped in a way that empowered Claire rather than simply solving the problem for her. But their happiness faced other challenges. Not everyone in Pine Ridge was comfortable with Arya and Claire's relationship. Most people were accepting or at least polite, but there were a few who made their disapproval known. A woman named Patricia, who attended the local church and sat on the town council, began a quiet campaign against them. She never said anything directly to Claire or Arya, but she spread rumors and made comments to others. She suggested that having an alien in town was dangerous. She implied that Claire and Arya's relationship was unnatural and setting a bad example for children. It hurt Claire more than she wanted to admit. She had grown up in this town and known Patricia her whole life. They had never been friends, but Claire had never expected such cruelty from a neighbor. Maybe she's right, Claire said one night after Patricia had given a speech at a town council meeting about protecting traditional values. Maybe you being here is making things harder for people. Do you want me to leave? Arya asked quietly, though the thought of leaving made her heart ache. No, Claire said immediately. Never. I just hate that loving you makes some people hate me. Love always costs something, Arya said, pulling Claire close. But it is worth the price. The conflict came to a head during a town council meeting about whether to officially welcome Arya as a resident of Pine Ridge or ask her to leave. Patricia spoke passionately about the need to maintain their way of life and not let outside influences corrupt their town. Several people nodded along with her arguments. Then old George stood up. He was respected in town, one of the founding families, and people listened when he spoke. Patricia, you talk about protecting our town and our values, he said, his voice steady despite his age. But you know what I think our real values are? Kindness, community, taking care of each other. My wife died 5 years ago and I wanted to die too. I sat in my empty house and waited for my heart to give out, because I couldn't see the point in going on without her. The room was silent. Everyone knew George had lost his wife, but he had never spoken about his grief so openly. Then Claire convinced me to come to the bookstore, George continued. She didn't push or prod. She just made sure I knew I was welcome. And gradually I started living again, reading books, talking to people, remembering how to smile. He looked at Claire with tears in his eyes. That girl saved my life by showing me kindness when I needed it most. And Arya, She's taught my grandkids about the universe. She fixed Danny's spaceship model that his dad gave him before he passed. She sits with Betty when Betty's arthritis is bad and keeps her company. He turned to face Patricia directly. So you tell me, Patricia, are those the actions of someone who's corrupting our town? Or are those the actions of someone who understands our values better than you do? One by one, other people stood up to speak. Lisa talked about how Arya's presentation had inspired her students to dream bigger. Danny shared how Arya had helped him fix equipment with techniques he had never imagined. Betty described how Arya had taught her new ways to manage pain using meditation techniques from other worlds. Even Emma, though she was just a child, stood up and said in a clear voice, "Arya is my friend. She's nice and her dragons are nice. Why would we want her to leave?" By the end of the meeting, the council voted unanimously to officially welcome Arya as a resident of Pine Ridge. Patricia left in angry silence, but she had lost. The town had chosen love and acceptance over fear and prejudice. Claire cried in Arya's arms that night, overwhelmed by how her community had stood up for them. "I was so scared," she admitted. "I thought I might lose you or lose my place here." "You will never lose me," Arya promised. "And this town loves you too much to let anyone drive you away." But the conflict had reminded Arya of something she had been trying to ignore. She was immortal, or close enough that the difference did not matter. Claire would age and eventually die, probably within the next 50 or 60 years if she was lucky. It was a fundamental inequality in their relationship that no amount of love could change. Arya began researching life extension technologies from her homeworld and other advanced civilizations. There were treatments that could slow human aging dramatically. She could potentially give Claire centuries or even millennia of life. She spent long nights aboard her ship, accessing galactic databases and consulting with experts through quantum communication. But when she finally worked up the courage to tell Claire what she had learned, Claire's reaction was not what she expected. "No," Claire said simply. "But you do not understand," Arya insisted. "I could give you so much more time. We could have centuries together instead of just decades. I could show you the entire galaxy. We would never have to say goodbye." "Arya, I love you," Claire said gently, "but I don't want to live forever. I don't want to watch everyone I know grow old and die while I stay young. I don't want to lose myself by living so long I forget what it means to be human." "You would not lose yourself," Arya argued. "You would simply have more time to be yourself." "Would I?" Claire asked. "My mom taught me that life is precious because it ends, that we should make every moment count because we only have so many of them. If I lived for 1,000 years, would I still feel that urgency? Would I still treasure each day? Or would I start thinking I had all the time in the world and stop really living?" Arya felt something twist in her chest. "So you would rather leave me? You would rather die and make me spend eternity without you?" "That's not fair," Claire said, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want to leave you. I don't want to die. But I want to live my life as a human, with a human's lifespan. That's part of who I am."